Well, thank you for that introduction. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. This is something I'm passionate about and I care a lot about, and I've done a lot of thinking. We're going to go pretty quick today. This is our agenda at the end. Really, my goal is to try to start a longer conversation. So we noticed that the transfer to this laptop kind of gummed up all my social media stuff along the bottom, but hopefully you can still read that. And I have business cards, and I'd love to get your card, and let's just continue this conversation as we go on. Today I'm going to introduce Delphinium, which is a gamification platform that I've been working on for the past 6 years. We're going to talk about what educational gamification is. We're going to talk about the results that I've been seeing in my research in educational gamification. We're going to talk about why that matters in your industries and where you work. I'm going to introduce, how many of you are instructional designers? I kind of pitched this to so a lot of you. I'm going to introduce an instructional design model that we've been putting together. And then I'm going to just dive in for the last few minutes on Delphinium so you can kind of see that a little closer. There's a lot here, and we're just going to get going right away. Very quickly, this all started in about 2012. If you're in the back, there's still seats. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's still kind of room. Feel free to come on in. 2012, I started noticing that my students were addicted to their phones. You know what I'm talking about, right? And to my mind came the question, I wish they were addicted to my homework, the way they're addicted to those phones. And about this time, this notion of gamification kind of entered into, kind of my sphere of what I've been reading and those things I've been looking at. And so that summer, I built my first educational gamification plug-in to Canvas. It was kind of laughable compared to what you see right now. And Delphinium was born. And so I'm a researcher, I'm an academic. I started doing what you do. You write papers, you write book chapters, and you go and give conference presentations. This is me. The first presentation I ever made on gamification was here at InstructureCon in 2014. AECT was another big one that we did. Since then, we've been growing a lot. We've put Delphinium into a variety of different courses, 40 different sections up till now. We've had thousands of students in there, and we are starting to grow into more institutions. So we've added three universities now. We're looking at a fourth. We've been getting good feedback from folks. Canvas gave us an innovation award a few years ago. If you're really into gamification, you got to go to Europe. And so World Gamification Congress in Spain, we won some awards there. I'm in the business school at Utah Valley University, and so Academy of Management is my home, and so we won a best paper for this work at the Academy of Management. And I've received a variety of awards for research and the teaching that we've done locally. So what are we talking about when we're talking about gamification? If there's still people in the back, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats. There's still room. Gamification tries to tap into one of the oldest human drives that there is, and that's play. If you go back into the archaeological records, you can find these are board games that are dug out of ancient Egypt from 5,000 years ago. There seems to be something about humans, the way we're made, across every culture, across all recorded history, that makes us want to play games. And so gamification tries to tap into that. There's something about the way our brains are made that drives us in that direction. Recently, the power of games have been studied, and the effectiveness has gotten near addictive. If you've ever played, I don't know, Candy Crush is like one of the worst, right? It's like a bad relationship. You just can't get rid of it. We'll talk a little bit about how you can design games that are bad relationships and ones that support more healthy interaction as well. So these days, about 40% of the population are considered gamers. This is mostly in the ages of 20 to 34, and about half of these are women. Women are playing more and more games, and if you consider all of the phone games and those kind of things, there really isn't a stereotypical, male in the basement of their parents', house playing, video games with a blanket over their head or whatever. Gamification, big topic, very hot. It's currently about a $3.6 billion industry. It's projected to grow to a $11.1 billion industry by 2020. If you're standing in the back, I've still got 1, 2, 3 seats right up here in front, and maybe there's one there. If you've ever used Khan Academy, if you've ever used Duolingo, if you've ever used, this is your LinkedIn account, the profile where they're trying to prod you to do more. You've experienced gamification. It's everywhere. You can find it in exercise, health, employee training, onboarding. It's everywhere. And probably the oldest version you can think of is maybe McDonald's Monopoly. If you think about that, that seemed like a game, and I want to make the distinction in a moment between games and gamification. But really what they were trying to get is brand loyalty out of you. The game was peripheral to the actual thing that they were trying to accomplish. So let's talk about what educational gamification is then. I'm going to start by saying what it's not. Educational gamification is not an educational game. Educational games have been around a long time. Maybe might be a switch for some of you to try to get out of that mode. So the problem with thinking about an educational game, or the difference between educational games and gamification, when I think about an educational game, I think of something like maybe it's a video game where Wolverine is fighting the bad guys and he gets tired, and so he jumps up into the tree and does some math, right? And then he comes back down and he fights the bad guys again. So in this scenario, the actual content that the student is interacting with is deeply integrated with the actual experience. Creating that type of experience is time-consuming and it's very expensive. So if you had to think about creating a learning game for all of the courses and all of the classes and all of the subjects, it's just prohibitive. You're not going to be able to do it. So what makes educational gamification different? Let's give a quick definition. This is probably the go-to definition for most people for gamification. It's by a guy by the name of Deerding. The idea there is using game mechanics in non-game environments. Now this next definition is specific to educational gamification. Let me read it to you. The use of situation or context appropriate and user-centered game elements in non-game educational systems to enhance the learner's ability to learn, drive engagement with content and learning activities, blah, 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 blah. It just goes on and on and on. I wrote it, right? So I can just make fun of it. This is let me tell you how I really think about gamification. If you take all the games, the great games in the world, and you put them in a blender, and you spun them up, and you just broke them down to their basic components, and you allow the parts that make you want to play the game, the part that addicts you or keeps you connected to the game, just kind of float up to the top of this sort of frothiness, this frothy goodness. And if you could scrape that off, leave the game, and keep the part that makes you want to stay in the game, and bring that over to an educational environment, and lay it as a thin layer over the courses you're working with. That's what I'm thinking of when I say educational gamification. This is a completely separate layer. If you think of your content as a layer, you think of your pedagogy as a layer, and if you think of motivational affordances as a separate layer, gamification is a motivational affordances layer. It's portable. You can lift it and drop it on other content. It's flexible, and you can do different things with it. Think about it for just a moment. Why do students do schoolwork? Because they must. There's typically some penalty associated with it, and so they'll do as much as required, and then they'll stop. Why do people play games, though? Because they want to. People will throw pigs at birds for hours. You tell me the utility they've gained out of that experience. It's hard to identify what that might be, right? Plants vs. Zombies, really fun game. What are you really getting out of that experience? Almost nothing. Almost nothing, but people will still do it. And again, this is tied to, there's something about the way humans are made that if you can align the right game elements in the experience, it will draw people through an experience, even if the experience is not a wonderful thing. I always joke with people, if you make a terrible course, I'll make people stay in it longer. Okay, so real quick. That was a slow burn on that one. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so does it work? What kind of results have I been able to see in gamification? I think this slide here is maybe a little chaotic at first, but it's very powerful if you'll let me walk you through it. This is data pulled from Canvas. If If you look across the bottom, we've got the dates. So this is a college class. We've got the first day of class and the last day of class. We've got the points possible in the class along that axis, so 0 to 1,000. As time goes up, you would expect people to perform and earn more points, and so the red line is where I expect them to be at any specific point in the class. You following me so far? This orange line right here is today. It's the day I gathered the data out, so I don't have any data after that. The blue lines are student when they turned in assignments, and there are little dots, if you can see, on the blue lines. Those are specific assignments, point values, and the time and date they turned them in. This is every student, and the orange dots is today. That's the last thing they turned in. What do you notice about the progress?
A lot of vertical jumps.
There's a lot of vertical jumps, right? They are performing far above what I'm asking them to do. Now, let me give you a little more data about this particular course. Not every gamified course has to be designed this way, but this is how this course is designed. There are no due dates. There's no sequence of events, no assignments in any specific order. They just are there in a big bucket and they can go get them. This is an online class, purely online. They've never met me, the teacher, and they've never met the other students. In that environment, they are far outperforming what is expected from them. Not because they have to, but because the game is drawing them, the gamification, I got to make that clarification, the gamification is drawing them through the content. So what kind of results are we seeing? 72% of students report that the gamified courses we put them in are more or much more motivating. I was especially encouraged to see that this was true for all demographics that we measured. So age, gender, their time that they weekly spend playing video games or don't play video games at all, their comfort level with technology. The correlation data showed there was no message there, right? It worked equally well across all of these different demographics. Students reported having more fun, they did their work earlier, and they did higher quality. I'll give you a quick anecdote why they do higher quality. So they get in there and they realize they're only 2 points behind somebody else. And they realize if I just stay here a little longer, I can get a little better and I'll move up above them the next time we check in and see how things are doing. Anecdotally, I have students come to me and say, I was on my couch last night, I was sitting with my spouse, we were watching Netflix, and the thought came into my mind, I could be doing homework right now. And they do. They turned off the TV and went and did homework. I've had other teachers complain to me and say that they have a student, just again, all anecdotally, but I've had a teacher complain to me that they had a student who said that they couldn't do their class's homework because they had to do mine right now. And one last anecdote is, it's fun if in class test, we use laptops to do the test. I see students finish the test quicker, pull out their cell phones, and take a snapshot of the leaderboard, because for those 3 minutes, they're way at the top in the rankings, right? There's still a lot of people in the back. You're welcome to stay there, and I won't say that again, but I just feel sad, that you look uncomfortable. Okay, this is the latest study we've done. This is the most rigorous study we've tried to pull together. It's a fully experimental design. So we had 14 sections of a Tech 1010. This is an entry-level, freshman-level technology class. It's required of all the students at the university. It's considered a gateway course and a high failure rate. About 1 in 4 students fail this class. So it looked like a good place to test gamification to see what kind of movement we could make on the needle. 10 sections were the control, 4 sections were gamified. In this scenario, I as the researcher am keeping my distance, so these are adjuncts and normal people, normal teachers who don't have any background in gamification doing this. And I'm going to introduce this acronym I'm going to use a lot for the rest of the day, WFDs, withdrawals, failures, and dropouts. So this is the thing that I think at least where I am right now in gamification, that's what I care about the most. Can I move the needle on withdrawals, failures, and dropouts? And so red is my controls, green is the 4 gamified sections. We were able to show a 67.6% decrease on withdrawals, a 47.4% reduction in failures. So we cut the failures basically in half. And remember, we have a 9-year history on this class of 1 in 4 students failing, and we were able to cut that in half. And then dropouts, 65.8% increase. I always like to put some words behind it. What do students say when they have these experiences? They say things like, I truly felt in control of my education. I knew what I had to do to reach my goal. I liked knowing that a little extra effort would make a difference. I would spend more time studying for this class than other classes. I saw that I was doing much better than I thought. Now that one actually turns out to be really interesting. A lot of times when you have a student who does not identify as a great learner, they kind of become their own worst enemy. And so when you show them where they're actually at in the class, that identity begins to change. We'll talk more about learner identity in a moment. So why should we care about all this? I think WFDs matter. Withdrawals, failures, and dropouts. Here's some stats. Completion rates are significantly lower for online classes, but more and more education is heading to online. Low income and underprepared students, my university is an open enrollment university, so we take anybody who comes in. We have a lot of first generation students who didn't perform well in high school. Low income and underprepared students have withdrawal rates that are 10 to 15% higher in online courses. So here we have the people who could potentially benefit the most from the education who are at the most disadvantaged because of the format that it's been delivered in. Graduation dropout rates for undergraduate degrees are about 41%. About 2 million students drop out each year with school loan debt. People without a degree make $17,500 less annually, which ends up being about $1 million less over their lifetime. And they're twice as likely to be unemployed. About 25% of the students enrolled in the fall of 2010 were still not graduated by 2016 at many universities. So these are sobering to me, and these are kind of a reason I care about this. Very practically, legislatures are starting to make academic outcomes like these a priority and a measure of the success. In other words, they're saying if you're going to use public funds for your institution, we need a return on the investment, and they're looking to WFDs and other kind of graduation rates and those kind of things. To me, more important than that, though, is we have a contract with our students. Me, the teacher, and the student, we have a contract. They're giving their time and their money to me, Jared, and the agreement is I'm going to give them something back that's going to improve their life at some point. And that, being from a university where we have a lot of first-time students, first generation students, I see it as a trajectory changer, right? That's going to change their personal trajectory's life, their children's trajectory's life. There is a lot of benefit and a lot of things that I can do if I can impact some of these problems, if I can make the WFDs lower and I can improve graduation. So consider this hypothetical example. Let's just go kind of maybe the way the legislature or people who are investing in education might think about it. If we compute the annual cost per graduated student at a large university, so if you think of a large university, they might have a $750 million a year budget. So that's facilities, that's teachers, that's the grounds, that's everything. The entire budget might be $750 million. So if you think of the university as a black box, $750 million goes in a year, and 8,500, let's say, graduates come out on the other side. If you do a little quick math, that's about $88,000 per student graduate per year. Can you follow that math? Okay, so money goes in, students come out. Per student, it's about $88,000 in this hypothetical scenario. If we could improve WFDs, withdrawals, failures, and dropouts, in such a way that we could get 1% more of the students graduating, so that'd be 85 students more, that would change that math, and it would be an improvement of about $875 per student, times the 8,500 and now 85 students, and you get about $7.5 million more return on the investment that you put in, just on 85 students. But if we're going to be more conservative, if I were to say, if you could help 1/10 of 1%, the numbers still work out pretty impressive. We end up with about a $750,000 return. It's not a turn. We're not a business. We don't make money. We make students. But we're saying that we are better stewards over that $7.5 million or that $750,000. Okay, so what's my point? Gamification has the potential to significantly improve our ability to do our job. And our job is to effectively and efficiently prepare students for the future. Okay, let's jump into the instructional design model. Before I get there, let's do a little bit of theory. I'm sure most of you know most of these things. Gamification as a theory has settled on self-determination theory. I think you can find some really terrible gamification that's based on behaviorism. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that because I don't have a lot of time, but I could talk a lot, and I'm pretty opinionated on that. But self-determination theory, let me jump into it a little bit. A big chunk of self-determination theory focuses on the difference between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, I don't think we need to talk about that because they're just doing it because it's in them already. And so we don't have to talk about that. What we're talking about is the students who don't necessarily want to be in school or don't necessarily want to do the homework. And self-determination theory will treat that extrinsic motivation as a spectrum. On the one side, you have this sort of behavioristic sort of force, coercion, reward, stimulus response. This is what keeps people gambling, that kind of stuff, right? This is not where we want to be for gamification because as soon as the rewards go away, so does the behavior. Right? So we're not going to talk about that either. So on the other end of this spectrum is when people do not necessarily want to do a thing, but they can see how that thing is aligned with their own purpose or their own vision for themselves, they begin to internalize those external motivators, those external purposes. So that's, I think, the sweet spot that we need to focus on educational gamification. Our goal then is to take something that they don't necessarily want to do, but to present it in a way that it starts to become part of what they really are trying to accomplish. It's maybe subversive to some other goal that they have. How do you do that? Three big things. You create environments where the students feel competent or successful. Their identity. I'm good at this. I like this, and so therefore I will continue. You've probably seen this in people you know. Maybe little kids do this all the time. They didn't know they were good at running, and now they are, and now they're running everywhere. My son is doing that these days. He has to high kick his butt because that's the cool way to run now. He didn't know he's a runner, and now he does. Autonomy. You create opportunities for students to make choices along the way. When people feel like they have a say in the outcome, then it begins to become more internalized to them. And then finally, relatedness. By relatedness, I mean some sort of social connection with others, or I mean some sort of connection to something that's meaningful. A lot of times in a game, that's like defeating the zombie apocalypse. I don't think we have to go there in education. I think we can connect people. For example, I teach in the MBA program, and we talk about working your way up through the ranks and becoming a CEO and pushing forward. So giving some sort of context that's meaningful to them that they can be thoughtful about. Dr. Richard Landers, if you want to read a good paper that kind of starts out on this, he gave us a theory of gamified learning a couple of years ago. I like it a lot. It's about the most concise thing I've seen lately. This is not it exactly. This is a very abridged version that kind of fits where I want to go with it. But the main idea is you start with your learning outcomes. And this is backward design, which probably a lot of you are very comfortable with. Once you know what you want the outcomes to be, you decide, well, what are the attitudes and behaviors? This might be a little different. You might be used to thinking, what are the pedagogical choices or activities I need to show them to get? In this case, we're going to think about what are the attitudes and behaviors we need the students to have so that they can arrive at those learning outcomes. And then so what are the outcomes that we're thinking about? Oh, I've totally jumped too many slides. Let me go back. Okay, so the outcomes we think a lot about in educational gamification, we want to think about those WFDs. We want to make sure that they're staying engaged in the class. We think about final grades. We're using that as a surrogate for the quality of what they learned. We assume the education was good, and so a grade is a surrogate for how well they interacted with that. And we want them to have some domain-specific information that they can carry with them out into the real world and do their jobs. So that's the outcomes we're looking for. The attitudes and behaviors. Oh, I know what happened. I was still talking about this guy. Okay, now I'm going to introduce my model. My model is based on his model. So my instructional design model is based on his theoretical model. Backwards design. This is what we start with. Now we're all together. So once you've identified the outcomes you're looking for, we want to look at what attitudes and behaviors we need students to have to arrive at these outcomes. Specifically, we want to know what they feel, what we need them to feel, and what we need them to do. So let's start with feel. It's easy to remember: skill, will, and thrill. Thrill, it needs to be fun, right? They need to like being there. They need to feel connected to it. If you're familiar with flow theory, a lot of educational gamification draws on those principles. Will, we're back to self-determination theory, success meaning autonomy, and I'm going to add urgency. My experience has shown me that if you don't put some sense of urgency, students will wait till the last day. And so I consider urgency will with a deadline, right? Just give them a reason to do things at certain times. And finally, we need them to feel skilled, right? They need to think of themselves as a great learner. This is a big slide to cover in like 30 seconds, but what we're really talking about is giving them a sense of direction. They know where they've been, they know where they're going, and they know where they are right now and what they need to do. Expert learners can run that process through. They can assess their current what to do and what do I need to be able to accomplish. They can start doing the work. They can set goals. They can evaluate themselves along the way, and then they can look at themselves and decide whether they need to change their behavior. That expert learners can do that. Many new learners cannot. And so something about gamification ought to surface that cycle in the information that's being given to the students. So as they participate in the gamified experience, they are having this experience, and they never knew it, but they start to see themselves then as better learners and having a better identity. This next one's a little weird. I named it. I'll probably rename it, but it seems like the best name so far. What do we want them to do? I'm calling this hygiene, learning hygiene, right? It's the things you just got to do if you're gonna kind of be a functioning person. As a functioning student, you've got to turn in your work. You've got to pay attention to when due dates are. You've got to interact appropriately with your peers, and you have to have good quality experiences. So something again about the gamification should surface these kind of things as well. So finally, now that we know what the students need to do, and we know what students need to feel, we need to select game elements that take us there, that create those experiences. So we'll start with a game element audit. So if you look across the vertical axis over there, you're going to see skill, will, and thrills, right? There's success, relatedness, autonomy. Urgency, that's all will. Direction, identity, that's all skill. And thrill, fun, engaging things. Across the top, I've put a few of the game elements you might choose to add to a course. And you'll begin by performing an audit. You'll say, well, okay, I've got a leaderboard. Does a leaderboard contribute to a sense of success? Well, yeah. Yeah, it can. We'll check that box. How about a connection or relatedness to other people? Inherently, a leaderboard will do that, right? You're there with other people. What about autonomy? I don't really see a lot that autonomy matches to leaderboards. I hope you're getting the idea. You do this audit, and when you're done, you go through and you find a complete package of experience, of gamified elements that hits all of skill, will, and thrill. This is how you ensure that you didn't leave something out along the way and have an experience that doesn't quite hit on all 6 cylinders. Everybody okay with that? Does that make sense? Oh, this is actually a screenshot from my personal Excel file. It's Easter eggs. Anyway, all right. So this is Delphinium, right? These are things that I've been building in Delphinium. What is Delphinium? It's a collection of plug-and-play widgets that you can drop into a course. So you develop an interface. You say, in this course, we have this type of interactions. These are the pedagogy decisions I've made. This is the content that we're working with. And you can then choose from a selection of game elements, drawing upon your audit to make sure you have a well-rounded game experience. Okay. So let's dive into Delphinium really quick. What is Delphinium exactly? It's an LTI skin. Okay, so you turn it on in Canvas, it wakes up, it says, what are my students? What assignments were there? What are the submissions? And then it builds the interface out of that class. It's a layer of interaction that on its own doesn't know anything until Canvas gives it some data, right? Really important here is I've tried very carefully as I've put this together to avoid imposing decisions on your pedagogy. So I like to say I'm pedagogy agnostic. Whatever you want to do, if you want to do cafeteria style, or if you want to use the the materials that came from the publisher. It's still going to work fine. It's just going to wake up in your course, and it's going to build itself off of what it can find in the information there. I also want to stay very clear of content, because if you get a game interface that you think is working really well, you kind of tweaked it and you like how it's working, I want you to be able to lift it and drop it into another course very quickly, 5-10 minutes, and you've got that working for you. So how does Delphinium interact with Canvas? This is maybe getting a little too much in the weeds, but I think it's interesting. Any Andy Gibbons acolytes in here? Some, yeah. Okay, so I went to Utah State University, and he was my mentor. He wrote a bunch of books on how to design instructional tools, and he always had this model that educational authoring tools ought to work like modern architecture. If you think about old-fashioned architecture like this building right here, the living space, the services, the structure, it's all tightly integrated. You can't move a fireplace in this building. You can't move a wall because you maybe want a bigger bedroom. You might jeopardize the structure of the entire building. So this old-style architecture, it's not very flexible. You can't adapt and change with it. Compare that to this picture. This is from an airport. You can see that the structure is very separate from the services, like where the air is coming through, which is very separate from the living spaces. You can see that they can slide past each other freely. They can be replaced at different rates, and they can be updated at different rates. That's how an environment should be. I think you can think of LMSs that don't do this. I won't mention any name. Canvas does this pretty well. So if you combine Canvas and you combine Delphinium, you get kind of like that modern architecture where these three layers, pedagogy, content, and motivational affordances, are all separate and distinct from each other, and they can move past, they can age at different rates, they can be updated at different rates, and ported into other environments. So I'm going to show you a few different interfaces that have been built with Delphinium. So this first one is a chemistry class. Canvas provides you with a modules interface. I like to call it the gray scroll of death. So these are both replacements to that gray scroll of death. They look very different, but they're drawing in Canvas data and building themselves off of what they found off your existing course. If you loaded either one of these interfaces into a different course, it would look kind of the same, but it would all be the lessons of the new course, if you can follow that. So this interface is pulling directly from a publisher's materials, right? And so as long as your materials, you see this a lot still, like it's a chemistry class, the publisher has a great separate system where you can do all your homeworks, but it'll kick the grades back to Canvas. Once they get back to Canvas, Delphinium will wake up, it'll find them, and it'll do what it needs to with them. This interface, on the other hand, is kind of the extreme other side. This is a cafeteria style. If you don't know what a cafeteria style design is, we don't actually care about the assignments in this model, in this approach. We care about the 1, 2, 3, 4, however many course outcomes. And then we provide dozens and dozens and dozens of assignments that align with those 5 outcomes. We don't even care if they never hit a specific chapter in the textbook in this approach. All we care is that you hit those 5. And so this interface very clearly shows the students how they're progressing in each of the 5 course outcomes. They're free to choose which ones they skip over, which ones they do or don't do. 2 more. These, if you look at it close, there's a lot of, these are almost the same set of game elements, but they're 2 different courses. This is actually my course. In my course, I arranged visually I wanted to arrange the content. Each one of these is a model, and when you, a module. And as you mouse over it, you can't see it right now. If you mouse over it, it'll pop up and show you all the assignments that are inside of these. And you can see very viscerally where I have been, where I can go, and what's available and what I need to in the future, so that where I've been, where I am, and where I need to go in the future. It's all in front of you all at once. I wanted to design the course, successful organizations are excellent people and an exceptional idea effectively designed. To me, that's one sentence that describes the whole course, and that's what they're bathed in throughout the entire experience. This is a German class where the teacher had a different approach. Same game elements, but the way she taught it was five units. Each unit was a movie in German, and she would teach German principles based off of that movie. And so again, you have this sort of walking you through almost like a board game in the way she's done it, and you would just kind of move through the course and see very clearly where you are, where you were, and how you need to get to where you're going. These are 2 more courses. This is not the modules interface. I just tried to throw in some of our game elements. So we've got a leaderboard, avatars, statistics, our current grade, Easter eggs are there. There's our achievements. So let me wrap up by saying I want you all to join the Delphinium Millennium, right? I want you all to become drinkers of the Kool-Aid. And I want you to improve your withdrawals, failures, and dropout rates. I want to, so this is a project, it's grant funded. We're trying to grow at least enough to, so we don't have to keep getting grants, because if you know how tedious that can be, then you know how tedious that can be. So we want to bring effective gamification to Canvas in an easy, cost-effective way. So what's next? Where do we go next? I'd love to have your business card. I've got a green bowl. Kind of delphinium-like. You know what delphinium? It's a flower. It's pretty. I like it. There's a whole metaphor, but we don't have time to talk about it. I'll talk about it after if you'd like to. So if you would leave your business card there, I'll get back to you. We can continue this conversation. I've got a stack of cards. You can come talk to me. I'll be at Hack Night tonight. I'd love to. I'll set up a table, and whoever comes by, I'll just talk to you about what we're doing. If you could follow this, the conversion to the Apple kind of wonked up my social media stuff. But we got a website at delphi-me.com. That says tiny URL /project Delphinium, and at Proj Delphinium you can get us there. I said at the beginning I'd like to start a longer conversation. I tried to just say everything I could say as quick as I could say. I'd love to have this conversation continue here at the conference. When you get back, let's get going. And I think, how much time do I have? I got 3 minutes for questions here and then here. Okay, so she says she's an instructional designer for mechanical and nuclear engineers.
So we have a lot of procedural and conditional knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? So how would you work that, and then how would you map that into a badging system?
Yeah, okay, so her question is, how would you map the procedural content, and how would you work it into the badging system? Procedurally, the way we have done that a lot is using prerequisites on the module. So anything you set up in Canvas as far as prerequisites and requirements and all that all pulls in and works the same in Delphinium. We're just making it engaging and providing more information to get us to the skill, will, and thrill, right? How would we handle badges? Badges should be informational. If you reward something, it's less and less intrinsic. If I give you cash. But if I reward you with information about your progress and success, that's enduring, right? And so that's what you want to do with your badges. You don't want to, I don't personally would never, give somebody, bonus points for doing kind of what was already expected in the class. Because if you don't give them any more, then they're just not going to do that anymore. So but I would say you've done something amazing. And the way our badges work, once you've earned them, they push into the leaderboard so everybody else can see which badges you've earned. So again, trying to create that social connection, sharing your progress through the course. Thank you. Second question.
Yeah, I really like the reskinning the modules to make it more interesting and engaging. Is it ADA compliant?
Yeah, so we got a $40,000 grant to make it all ADA compliant. We're reaching the end of that project. We're testing it here in the fall. So yeah, we are. It's not as easy as you might think. How do you make an avatar that has millions of combinations ADA compliant? The answer is you just write really long descriptions. And so that's the kind of thing that we're working on right now. Other questions, please. So again, I'm not a business. I'm a researcher. We are working with a handful of universities who would like to kind of see this grow and help support the progress. I would love, if all of you said, let's do this today, I'd say I can't. My goal out of this is to pick up, 10 max people that I can continue to grow and develop the project with. Admit sometime in the future, hopefully I can take it there where I can just turn it on like anybody else turns it on. I'm not there right now, and it wouldn't be good for anybody if I did. I spend a lot of personal time with the universities that I work with. I have programmers, and I just work with them and make sure it's doing what I think it's supposed to be doing and working with it along the way. So yeah, if you want to be one of the 5 or 10, please come. I'd love to have you. We want to see this thing grow.